Lesnar has reportedly leaked new evidence revealing a darker side of Hulk Hogan, exposing the man behind the legend. Even more startling, Hogan's ex-wife had warned fans about this all along. He's a complete liar. He's a walking statue. This new evidence might just change everything you thought you knew about Hulk Hogan. The real feud between Brock Lesnar and Hulk Hogan is far more than just scripted wrestling drama. When most fans think of legendary wrestling rivalries, names like Stone Cold vs. The Rock or Hulk Hogan vs. Andre the Giant come to mind. But behind the scenes, a quiet and bitter feud has simmered for over 20 years between two of wrestling's biggest icons, Brock Lesnar and Hulk Hogan. What started as scripted drama turned into a very real and personal conflict. After reviewing all the facts, it seems Lesnar's instincts about Hogan were spot on. It all began in the summer of 2002. WWE was pushing Brock Lesnar as the next big thing, young, fierce, and unstoppable. They wanted him to dethrone The Rock as WWE champion. But first, Lesnar had to prove himself against wrestling legends. Enter Hulk Hogan, freshly returned to WWE after years away, the perfect giant for Lesnar to take down. Managed by the cunning Paul Heyman, Lesnar launched a relentless campaign of insults against Hogan week after week. One of the most memorable moments was when Lesnar hijacked Hogan's limo, a real show of disrespect that blurred the lines between performance and genuine animosity. Eventually, Hogan snapped and challenged Lesnar to a match. Stephanie McMahon officially scheduled it for August 8, 2002, on SmackDown. The plan? A classic wrestling rite of passage. The veteran legend puts over the rising star by losing. Hogan agreed, ready to help Lesnar cement his place. But once the bell rang, Lesnar wasted no time establishing his dominance. Their first lockup sent Hogan flying across the ring, his trademark bandana ripped off midair. Despite his age and injuries, Hogan fought back with a few powerful shots, but Lesnar controlled the match from start to finish. Here was a 25-year-old NCAA wrestling champion going toe-to-toe with a 49-year-old icon. The difference in skill and athleticism was stark. The match ended brutally. Heyman interfered to block Hogan's signature leg drop, and Lesnar locked in a crushing bear hug targeting Hogan's injured ribs. Hogan passed out, and the referee called the match. Lesnar won by knockout. But Lesnar wasn't done. He smashed a steel chair into Hogan's head and smeared the legend's blood across his chest. It was a savage, symbolic passing of the torch, violent and on Lesnar's terms. From a business standpoint, the match was a massive success. Lesnar soon defeated The Rock to become the youngest WWE champion ever. But that 2002 clash left a lasting mark, setting the stage for an even more explosive confrontation 12 years later. By 2014, both men had changed dramatically. Lesnar had conquered UFC as heavyweight champion before returning to WWE as a part-time but dominant force. Hogan's career had been rocked by scandals, and he had parted ways with WWE. Then, on August 14, 2014, during a Monday Night Raw segment meant to celebrate Hogan's 61st birthday, the tension exploded. The wrestling world gathered to honor Hogan's legacy with family and fans present. But then Lesnar appeared with Paul Heyman, and the mood shifted instantly. Lesnar's insult was more than a scripted jab. Sources say it crossed into personal disrespect. Hogan's family was watching live as Lesnar publicly humiliated the wrestling icon. John Cena, set to face Lesnar at SummerSlam, even stepped in to cool tensions. Hogan later admitted the grandpa comment cut deep, calling Lesnar out for crossing the line, especially with his family present. Brock Lesnar, you better bite your tongue when you start throwing my name around. Lesnar's return to WWE had given him rare creative freedom, and his UFC background lent him unmatched legitimacy. Meanwhile, Hogan's era was fading, and the younger generation no longer played by the old respect rules. This power shift left Hogan frustrated and unable to respond in kind, as wrestling politics no longer favored veterans like him. Their backstage feud simmered on, with Hogan making public comments and Lesnar staying silent, letting his actions speak. But to truly understand Lesnar's disdain, We have to look deeper at Hogan's real-life controversies, the scandals and lies that tarnish the legend. Hogan repeatedly lied about his wrestling history with Lesnar. On podcasts and interviews, Hogan claimed he worked with Lesnar after his UFC return, trying to soften him up in the ring. But this is false. They only wrestled once in 2002, before Lesnar's UFC stint. When Lesnar returned in 2012, his first WWE opponent was John Cena, not Hogan. Hogan wasn't even wrestling at that time. This wasn't a simple slip-up, it was a deliberate attempt to insert himself into Lesnar's success story. Wrestling fans have called him out for this pattern of exaggeration, which is consistent with other fabricated stories about his career. Beyond these lies, Hogan's dark side emerges in other scandals. The infamous 2006 inappropriate leaked tape led to a lawsuit that bankrupted Gawker, but also exposed Hogan's racist remarks. In the tapes, Hogan used racial slurs repeatedly while discussing his daughter dating a black man. WWE fired him in 2015, removing him from their Hall of Fame. Hogan apologized, blaming personal struggles and bad timing, even admitting to suicidal thoughts after the scandal broke. But many saw this as damage control rather than true remorse. His casual use of racial slurs suggested deep-seated issues, and WWE fans booed him even after his 2018 Hall of Fame reinstatement. Family troubles added more layers. Hogan's 26-year marriage ended bitterly, with his ex-wife accusing him of lying and infidelity. Hogan's affair with a friend of their daughter during their reality show filming devastated the family further. His controlling behavior, including GPS tracking his daughter's car, revealed a darker personality behind the scenes. A reckless culture extended to his children too. His son's 2007 car crash left a passenger with permanent brain damage and led to jail time, raising questions about the family's lifestyle. Hogan's ego clashed with wrestling insiders as well. A public backstage rant from WCW's Vince Russo exposed resentment over Hogan's refusal to lose matches, leading to lawsuits that helped sink WCW. Even allegations of sexual charges and admitted long-term steroid use shadowed his career. More recently, Hogan caused controversy with racially insensitive remarks at a 2024 promotional event, blaming alcohol but deepening the stain on his legacy. Putting all this together, Hogan's squeaky-clean hero image crumbles to reveal a man often dishonest, manipulative, and self-centered. He betrayed his family, misled fans, and prioritized ego over integrity both in and out of the ring. Given all this, it's easy to see why Lesnar saw through the myth and treated Hogan with such disdain. Then came July 24, 2025. Hulk Hogan passed away at 71 from cardiac arrest. His family called him a legend who inspired millions over 4 decades. But even in death, the mixed legacy remains. His final WWE appearance in January 2025 was met with a mix of cheers and boos, reflecting the complicated feelings of fans. Notably, Brock Lesnar has remained silent, making no public statement. Unlike legends like Ric Flair or The Undertaker, Lesnar's choice to say nothing speaks volumes. Some see it as respect or privacy, but most believe it's contempt. To understand Hogan's place in wrestling history, you must see both sides. The groundbreaking superstar who changed the industry, and the flawed man whose controversies shadowed his achievements. From his iconic victory over the Iron Sheik in 1984, the birth of Hulkamania, and the unforgettable slam of Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3, moments that drew millions and transformed wrestling, Hogan's impact is undeniable. His NWO heel turn in the 90s reshaped wrestling storytelling and helped WCW dominate ratings. Hogan wasn't just a wrestler, he was a cultural phenomenon who helped take wrestling mainstream. But his story is also a cautionary tale of fame's price, a complex legacy mixing heroism, scandal, and controversy. Whether loved or reviled, Hulk Hogan changed wrestling forever. And Brock Lesnar's long-running feud with him revealed the man behind the myth, a figure deserving respect, but also scrutiny. It all started in 2001, when the news broke like a thunderclap across the wrestling world. Brock Lesnar, The Beast incarnate himself had allegedly leaked a trove of evidence that painted Hulk Hogan, the man so many had called immortal, in a far darker light than fans could have ever imagined. It wasn't just a throwaway rumor whispered backstage or a half-baked social media post. This was reportedly hard proof, photos, recordings, and confidential testimonies that, if true, could dismantle decades of carefully constructed legacy in an instant. And what made the revelation all the more shocking was the timing. Mere weeks before the highly anticipated showdown between Hogan and Lesnar, a clash already being billed as a generational war between powerhouses. The first whispers began in hushed tones in locker rooms and private group chats. At first, many assumed it was just another mind game. After all, Lesnar was no stranger to psychological warfare. He had intimidated legends, humiliated rivals, and bent storylines to his will through brute force and calculated intimidation. But this felt different. This wasn't about taunting an opponent into a mistake in the ring. This was about shattering the very foundation Hogan stood on. It wasn't just about beating the man in a match. It was about beating the myth before the bell even rang. By the time the leaks made their way to wrestling media, the headlines were incendiary. Brock Lesnar exposes Hulk Hogan's dark side. Lesnar leaks Hogan's scandal evidence. Immortal no more? Each article hinted at a trove of files, alleged recordings of Hogan berating young talent backstage, questionable financial dealings tied to charity events, and an incident from the early 90s that no one dared speak about publicly. The wrestling community was split right down the middle. Some cried foul, accusing Lesnar of manufacturing drama to hype the match. Others admitted, with a reluctant chill, that if anyone could dig up dirt on a man like Hogan, it would be Brock Lesnar. Hogan's reaction was nothing short of volcanic. Witnesses claimed that when his team brought him the news, he slammed his hand on the table so hard that water bottles scattered across the room. To Hogan, this wasn't just an attack, it was an assassination attempt on his identity. His legacy wasn't just about championship belts or main events, it was built on the larger-than-life image of a hero who inspired millions. Now, with Lesnar holding what he claimed was the truth, that image was under siege. The problem was, Hogan knew the public didn't care about nuance. In the court of public opinion, the mere existence of allegations could be enough to burn down a lifetime of work. Backstage at Monday Night Raw, tension crackled like static. Lesnar, flanked by Paul Heyman, moved through the corridors with the quiet swagger of a man who knew he had the upper hand. He didn't have to say a word. His mere presence was a provocation. Cameras caught Hogan arriving later that night, his jaw tight, eyes burning with a mix of rage and determination. The two passed each other in a hallway, their shoulders nearly brushing. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Lesnar smirked. Hogan didn't break his glare. No words were exchanged, but the message was loud and clear. This wasn't going to be settled with a handshake. Later that evening, Heyman took the mic in the ring, his voice dripping with that trademark blend of mockery and gravitas. He teased the real Hulk Hogan, promising that the truth would not only be told, but shown to the entire world. Hogan's music hit mid-sentence, the crowd erupting as the red and yellow icon stormed to the ring. His face was flushed, not with the usual performative energy, but with genuine fury. What followed was less of a promo and more of a public confrontation. Hogan accused Lesnar of fabricating evidence, of crossing a line that no man should cross. Lesnar, barely fazed, stood stone-faced, then delivered a chilling line into the microphone. "Truth hurts, brother. And I've got enough to make you wish you never laced up your boots." It was the kind of moment wrestling fans live for, the blend of reality and fiction, so tightly woven together that no one could tell where one ended and the other began. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #Hogan vs. Lesnar and #Truth Hurts Brother trended for hours. Analysts debated whether this was the most personal rivalry of Lesnar's career, eclipsing even his feuds with The Undertaker and John Cena. But beneath the entertainment value was an undeniable sense that something deeper, more dangerous, was brewing. In the days that followed, small snippets of the alleged evidence began surfacing. A grainy audio clip purported to be Hogan making derogatory remarks about a fellow wrestler decades ago. A blurred still image showed what looked like Hogan in a heated argument with a young, unnamed rookie backstage. Wrestling journalists noted the timing. These leaks seemed orchestrated, each one carefully dropped to inflict maximum damage ahead of the pay-per-view. And each leak was accompanied by the same cryptic tag from Lesnar's camp: more to come. For Hogan, the battle lines had been drawn. He doubled down on his narrative, appearing in interviews to defend his name, each time swearing that the so-called evidence was doctored, taken out of context, or outright fabricated. But even in his most passionate defenses, there was a shadow in his eyes, a flicker of something unspoken. Was it fear of being exposed, or just the awareness that even the strongest icons are vulnerable when the court of public opinion turns? The match itself, which had once been billed purely as a clash of legends, took on a much darker tone. Promoters leaned into the controversy, framing it as not just a physical contest, but a trial by combat for Hogan's very reputation. Lesnar relished in the role of executioner, while Hogan positioned himself as the wronged warrior, fighting not just for victory, but for vindication. When the night of the pay-per-view finally arrived, the atmosphere was electric and uneasy. Fans weren't sure whether they were about to witness a wrestling classic or a public dismantling of a hero. The pre-match video package didn't shy away from the scandal. In fact, it embraced it, splicing footage of Lesnar's accusations with Hogan's emotional rebuttals. The final shot before the bell was a split screen of both men backstage, Lesnar smirking as he laced his boots, Hogan staring into the mirror like a man preparing for the fight of his life. From the opening bell, the match was more than physical, it was psychological. Every time Hogan tried to rally, Lesnar would taunt him, leaning close enough to his words only the microphones might catch. Every suplex, every stiff shot felt loaded with meaning, as if Lesnar wasn't just trying to pin Hogan, he was trying to strip him bare in front of the world. Hogan fought with the desperation of a man clinging to something bigger than himself. The crowd roared with every Hogan comeback, but the momentum always seemed to swing back to Lesnar. Halfway through the match, in a moment that felt scripted yet uncomfortably real, Lesnar paused mid-beatdown to roll out of the ring, grab a microphone, and demand the production team play the final piece of evidence. The arena's big screen lit up with a video, blurry, distorted, but unmistakably showing Hogan in a moment of explosive anger toward a crew member. The crowd's reaction was a mix of gasps, boos, and stunned silence. Hogan's face in that moment told the whole story. Whether the footage was real or not, the damage was done. But wrestling is as much about redemption as it is about downfall. Fueled by the crowd's divided energy, Hogan roared back with a flurry of offense, channeling the same raw charisma that had carried him to the top decades ago. For a few fleeting minutes, the past seemed to fade, and all that mattered was the fight in front of him. But Lesnar, ever the predator, absorbed the storm and delivered the final, crushing blow, a decisive F5 that left Hogan sprawled on the mat. As Lesnar's music hit and his hand was raised, he didn't celebrate. He stood over Hogan, looking down at him not with the usual chest-thumping bravado, but with the quiet satisfaction of a man who believed he had proved his point. Hogan, still on the mat, stared up at the lights, his chest heaving, his legacy hanging in the balance. The cameras cut to Lesnar walking up the ramp, Heyman at his side, both of them leaving the ring as though they'd just finished a business transaction. In the ring, Hogan slowly sat up, the crowd still buzzing with conflicting emotions. Some cheered his resilience, others booed the man they felt had been unmasked. The commentators didn't declare a clear moral victor, they simply left the audience with one question. In this battle between myth and muscle, who really won? Backstage, sources claimed Hogan sat alone in his locker room for nearly an hour after the match, his phone buzzing constantly with messages from old friends, fellow legends, and concerned fans. Meanwhile, Lesnar reportedly left the arena without speaking to anyone, the so-called evidence still locked away, with promises from his camp that the full story had yet to be told. And that's where the line between reality and storytelling blurred beyond recognition. Was Lesnar's evidence authentic, or was it the most elaborate mind game in WWE history? Was Hogan truly the victim of a smear campaign, or had the Beast incarnate simply pulled back the curtain on a side of the immortal one the world wasn't ready to see? Whatever the truth, one thing was certain: the fallout from Brock Lesnar's bombshell had only just begun. In the days following the explosive match, the WWE Universe was left reeling. The arena might have emptied, the lights gone dark, and the production crew moved on to the next city, but the conversation surrounding Brock Lesnar's leaked evidence against Hulk Hogan refused to die down. Social media timelines were a battlefield of divided loyalties. On one side were the die-hard Hulkamaniacs, insisting this was all a carefully orchestrated smear campaign. On the other were those who believed Lesnar had finally ripped away the glossy veneer of a man they claimed had been hiding his true nature for decades. The very next morning, headlines across wrestling news sites screamed in bold letters: Lesnar's victory overshadowed by shocking scandal fallout and WWE investigating Hogan allegations. Inside the locker room, reactions. The truth was, there was no official investigation, at least not one WWE wanted to acknowledge publicly, but the optics alone were enough to send shockwaves through the company's upper management. Vince McMahon, no stranger to navigating PR nightmares, reportedly held a closed-door meeting with Triple H, Stephanie McMahon, and Nick Khan to discuss damage control. The company had spent decades building Hogan into an icon whose name and image could sell everything from pay-per-views to lunchboxes. Now, thanks to Lesnar's theatrics, the immortal brand was teetering on the edge of collapse. Backstage morale was a complicated tangle of emotions. Younger talent whispered among themselves, some almost gleeful at the thought that the pedestal Hogan had stood on for so long might finally crumble. Others, particularly the veterans who had shared locker rooms and road trips with him, were visibly shaken. One unnamed WWE Hall of Famer, speaking off the record, summed it up bluntly: "We all have our flaws, but once the fans think you've lied to them, it's over." And Lesnar, he doesn't play around. If he's holding something, he's holding it for a reason. Meanwhile, Hogan was in a state of calculated silence. He skipped a scheduled podcast appearance and canceled media interviews he had agreed to in the weeks before the match. Instead, he retreated to his Clearwater mansion, surrounded by a tight circle of family and old friends. A drone camera from a tabloid outlet captured him on his balcony one evening, staring out over the water, phone in hand, seemingly deep in conversation. No one knew if he was talking to WWE lawyers, PR handlers, or Lesnar himself. Lesnar, in typical Lesnar fashion, didn't say much publicly, but when he did, it was nuclear. Appearing on a short backstage segment on SmackDown the following Friday, he looked directly into the camera and said, "What I've shown the world is just the tip of the iceberg." Hogan knows it. WWE knows it. And deep down, you know it too. He then smirked, tossed the microphone, and walked off, leaving fans and commentators buzzing about what else could possibly be in his possession. Paul Heyman, ever the mouthpiece and master manipulator, fanned the flames further in interviews. "Brock Lesnar has restraint," he said during one sit-down. If Brock wanted to bury Hulk Hogan, the match wouldn't have even needed to happen. The fact that Hulk Hogan even made it to that ring tells you one thing: Brock hasn't decided to unleash the full story, yet. The "yet" became the most dangerous word in WWE for the next several weeks. Every show, every promo, every social media post from Lesnar's camp was met with speculation that this might be the night he dropped the final bombshell. Fans began digging through Hogan's past themselves, resurfacing old interviews, controversies, and forgotten lawsuits. The line between kayfabe and reality blurred so heavily that even longtime insiders admitted they weren't sure where the storyline ended and the truth began. Hogan, however, wasn't about to let Lesnar dictate the narrative forever. After 2 weeks of absence, his music finally hit on Monday Night Raw. The crowd's reaction was a strange cocktail of nostalgia, loyalty, and doubt. Some fans stood and cheered out of habit, while others sat back, arms folded, waiting to hear what he had to say. Dressed in his classic red and yellow gear, but with a more somber expression than usual, Hogan stepped into the ring and took a long pause before speaking. "I've been in this business for decades, brother," he began, his voice heavy but steady. "I've faced giants, warriors, and legends. I've been body slammed, choked out, and busted open. But nothing hits harder than having your life twisted into a weapon against you." He stopped to let the crowd react, their voices a mixture of boos and chants of "Hogan. Hogan. Brock Lesnar," he continued. "You say you've got evidence? Then stop playing games. Bring it all out. Show the world what you've got. But I promise you this. When it's all said and done, the only thing people will remember is the night I beat the Beast incarnate and proved what kind of man I really am." It was a challenge, and Lesnar answered almost immediately. Later that night, his Titantron lit up, not from backstage, but from what appeared to be a dark, private studio. The camera zoomed in on Lesnar's face, shadowed and intense. "Hogan," he said slowly, "I don't need to prove anything to you. You've been proving my point for years. I'm just giving the world the receipts." He reached off camera, picked up a thick manila folder, and held it toward the lens. "I'll see you at Survivor Series. And when I walk out of that ring, I'm walking out with your legacy in my hands." From that moment, the hype for Survivor Series became more than a wrestling event. It was being billed as a trial, a reckoning. WWE leaned into the drama with video packages that looked less like match promos and more like true crime documentaries. Grainy archival footage of Hogan's career played alongside Lesnar's icy soundbites, the tension building with every clip. Behind the scenes, tensions reached a boiling point. WWE's creative team debated how far they could push the storyline without alienating Hogan's core fanbase. Lesnar, for his part, reportedly insisted on creative freedom, telling officials, "If you want me to go halfway, get someone else. I either do this my way or I don't do it at all." When Survivor Series finally arrived, the air in the arena was unlike anything WWE had seen in years. The crowd was split down the middle, half draped in red and yellow, the other in Lesnar's black and white eat, sleep, conquer, repeat shirts. The ring announcer's voice trembled slightly as he introduced the competitors, not because of fear, but because the atmosphere was suffocating with anticipation. The bell rang, and the first few minutes were a pure brawl, no grappling, no showmanship, just raw fists and fury. Hogan fought like a man trying to punch through the weight of every accusation hanging over him, while Lesnar moved with the calculated brutality of a predator. Every suplex felt like a statement. Every Hulk-up felt like a desperate grasp at redemption. Then, midway through the match, the arena's lights dimmed. On the big screen, without warning, a new piece of evidence began to play. The footage was clearer than anything Lesnar had shown before. An old backstage clip of Hogan during his prime years, yelling at a young wrestler who would later become a fan favorite. The crowd reacted instantly, a tidal wave of boos and gasps washing over the match. Hogan's eyes widened as he stared at the screen, his hands momentarily dropping from a defensive stance. That split second was all Lesnar needed. He charged, scooped Hogan onto his shoulders, and delivered a devastating F5. The impact shook the ring. The referee's hand hit the mat 3 times, and just like that, Lesnar had not only beaten Hogan physically but once again used the controversy to undermine him in the eyes of the fans. Lesnar didn't celebrate. Instead, he walked over to the ropes, demanded a microphone, and said one final, chilling line, "This isn't over. I've still got more." The arena buzzed with uncertainty. What more could he possibly have? And was Hogan even in a position to survive it? By the time the pay-per-view went off the air, the conversation had shifted from who won the match to what's next in this war. The Beast incarnate had turned a dream match into a personal vendetta, and Hulk Hogan's fight for redemption was far from over. The morning after Survivor Series, the wrestling world was a powder keg. Every sports outlet, podcast, and fan forum was dissecting not just Brock Lesnar's dominant victory over Hulk Hogan, but the new footage that had played mid-match. Wrestling journalists were using words like career-altering, irreversible, and point of no return to describe Hogan's situation. Even outside the wrestling bubble, mainstream news picked up the story, because this wasn't just a loss inside the squared circle. It was an assault on an entire brand, an entire era of wrestling history. WWE's PR team was in overdrive. Internally, there were whispers of top executives debating whether Hogan's contract should be quietly suspended to let the dust settle. Publicly, they released a vague statement claiming the footage Lesnar aired was contextually misleading and not reflective of the Hulk Hogan fans have come to know. But it was weak, fans weren't buying it. Lesnar had been methodical. He had offered just enough clarity in the video to make it damning, but left enough out to keep people asking questions. Triple H, who'd been tasked with overseeing creative, reportedly told close confidants, Lesnar's turned this into a blood feud. This isn't about wins or losses anymore, it's about annihilation. Hogan, for his part, refused to go into hiding. He took to social media with a single, defiant post, a picture of him training in his home gym, sweat pouring down his face, captioned, "The fight's just getting started, brother." It went viral within minutes, the post's replies a storm of support, mockery, and speculation. Lesnar responded in kind, posting a photo of that same manila folder he'd teased weeks earlier. This time, the caption was simple, endgame. No hashtags, no promo, just a promise. Behind the scenes, the WWE locker room had turned into a split battlefield. Some believed Hogan deserved the benefit of the doubt. Others, especially younger wrestlers, saw this as a symbolic changing of the guard, the tearing down of an old, untouchable monument to make way for a new era. A former WWE champion, speaking anonymously to Pro Wrestling Insider, said, "I've seen Lesnar pull mind games before, but not like this. He's not just working an angle, he's going for Hogan's soul." WWE producers began brainstorming ways to keep the storyline's momentum alive while also protecting the company from real-world fallout. One proposal that gained traction was an in-ring face-to-face segment on Raw, heavily moderated, where Hogan and Lesnar would confront each other without physical contact. But Lesnar reportedly laughed when he heard about it and told Heyman, "The only time I'm standing across from him again is when it's the final nail in the coffin." Then came the shocker. On an unassuming Thursday morning, Lesnar's camp sent an encrypted file to several major wrestling journalists. Inside was a teaser reel, just 30 seconds long, of never-before-seen backstage footage spanning decades of Hogan's career. The clips were silent, the audio removed, but the imagery was damning enough to ignite every rumor mill in existence. Hogan in heated confrontations with unnamed wrestlers. Hogan gesturing aggressively towards staff members. Hogan storming out of meetings. The message was clear. Lesnar had a library, and he was ready to open it. The response was immediate. Fans demanded WWE address the growing scandal. Sponsors began asking quiet but pointed questions. A major sports drink brand reportedly paused their Hogan-related promotional material. And then, in a twist no one saw coming, Lesnar went on the Pat McAfee show. Sitting casually in a black hoodie, his tone calm but cold, he told the world, "I don't hate Hulk Hogan. I respect what he did for this business." But respect doesn't mean ignoring the truth. People have worshipped an image for decades, and I'm showing them the man behind it. This isn't about wrestling. This is about accountability. The statement was surgical, void of trash talk, dripping with self-righteousness. It made Hogan's challenge even steeper. Now, if Hogan responded with the usual over-the-top bravado, it would seem hollow next to Lesnar's calculated, almost stoic dismantling. But Hogan wasn't done. On the next episode of Raw, the arena lights dimmed, and a spotlight hit the entrance ramp. His music hit, but there was no posing, no pointing to the crowd. Instead, Hogan walked slowly to the ring in street clothes, carrying a microphone. He looked directly into the camera and began speaking, not to Lesnar, but to the fans. "I've heard what Lesnar said. I've seen the videos. I've watched as people I've entertained for 40 years start to question who I am. And maybe I haven't been perfect. Maybe I've made mistakes I wish I could take back. But don't you dare think for one second that a man like Brock Lesnar, who's hurt more people in this business than I can count, is the one to judge me. You want to know the truth, Brock? You don't have to leak another second of footage. I'll stand right here in this ring and I'll tell it myself. The crowd erupted. It wasn't the Hogan of old, it was raw, stripped down, vulnerable. And for the first time in weeks, the momentum shifted. Hogan admitted to having a temper in his younger days, to letting the pressures of fame get the better of him. But he framed it as growth, as a journey of becoming a better man. The crowd, sensing sincerity, began chanting his name. It was a gamble, but it worked, at least for the moment. Lesnar's response came fast. That same night, during the main event, the big screen lit up with live footage from outside Hogan's Clearwater mansion. Lesnar was there, pacing in the driveway with Heyman holding a camera. You talk about truth, Hogan? Let's have that conversation in person. Security rushed in, but Lesnar didn't resist. He just smiled, pointed at the camera, and mouthed the words, "Final chapter." Within hours, WWE announced what they called the trial of Hulk Hogan for the upcoming Royal Rumble. It wouldn't be a traditional match. Instead, it would be a no-disqualification fight, promoted as Hogan's last stand. A chance to either clear his name or have his career symbolically ended by the Beast incarnate. The stakes were set, the storyline more real than fiction, and the world was hooked. Royal Rumble night arrived not with the usual anticipation of surprise entrants and championship drama, but with an undercurrent of unease that rippled through the arena from the moment the doors opened. This wasn't just another WWE pay-per-view. This was being sold and felt like a public execution or a miraculous redemption, depending on who you asked. The posters around the stadium didn't even show the Royal Rumble match front and center. Instead, they featured a split image of Hulk Hogan and Brock Lesnar, both framed in stark black and white, eyes locked on the viewer. In bold red letters, "The Trial of Hulk Hogan." Commentators spent the entire pre-show walking fans through the history that had brought them here. Lesnar's initial leak, the Survivor Series humiliation, the mounting tension, and the final challenge issued just weeks ago. Corey Graves summed it up in one line: "Tonight, the Beast isn't just hunting Hogan's body, he's hunting his legacy." Backstage, cameras caught glimpses of both men preparing. Hogan sat alone in a dimly lit room, his red bandana tied tight, hands taped, muttering to himself. Not his usual over-the-top hype, but something quieter, more inward, like a man reciting the terms of his own survival. In the opposite wing, Lesnar paced like a caged predator, Heyman at his side whispering in his ear. Occasionally, Lesnar would glance at a small black hard case resting on the table in the corner. Heyman had teased all week that this case held the final piece of the truth. The bell tolled for the opening of the segment, and the crowd swelled into a roar that was equal parts excitement and hostility. Hogan emerged first, a break from tradition. Because WWE wanted the audience to see him walk that long ramp alone. The crowd was split, cheers from the loyalists who refused to believe the worst, boos from those convinced Lesnar had already won the moral war. Hogan stepped into the ring, slowly peeled off his entrance gear, and waited. Then the arena lights dimmed, and Lesnar's theme hit like an earthquake. The Beast incarnate stormed down the ramp, his face cold, no theatrics. Heyman trailed behind, clutching the black case like it was nuclear launch codes. When Lesnar stepped into the ring, he didn't circle or taunt. He just walked straight up to Hogan and stared. The referee slid between them, officially announcing the rules. No disqualification, no countout, anything goes. The match began explosively. Lesnar struck first, slamming Hogan into the corner with a barrage of shoulders, each impact echoing through the arena. Hogan tried to fire back with heavy punches, rallying the crowd, but Lesnar's power overwhelmed him early. German suplex after German suplex sent Hogan crashing to the mat, and with each throw, Lesnar barked something inaudible at his opponent, private insults, reminders, maybe even the same phrases from those leaked clips. But Hogan wasn't here to be a punching bag. He hulkied up after a particularly brutal clothesline, feeding off the chants of Hogan. Hogan. His punches landed heavier now, forcing Lesnar back. A big boot staggered the Beast, and for a brief moment, Hogan looked like the hero again. He hit the ropes for the leg drop, only for Lesnar to explode upward, catching him mid-stride into an F5. Lesnar didn't cover him. Instead, he rolled out of the ring and grabbed the black case from Heyman. The crowd's noise shifted from excitement to an uneasy buzz. Lesnar set the case in the middle of the ring, unlatched it slowly, and pulled out a tablet. He held it up so the cameras and every screen in the arena could see. Final chapter, Lesnar growled into the mic. The arena screens flickered to life and grainy footage began to play. Unlike the previous clips, this wasn't decades old. This was recent, just months prior, showing Hogan in what appeared to be a heated backstage meeting, slamming his fist on a table, shouting at someone off camera. The audio was muffled, but enough words cut through to sting. "I made this company, and without me, you're nothing." The crowd gasped. Hogan's face drained of color. Whether it was shock, shame, or fury was hard to tell. He stood frozen, watching his own image unravel in front of the world. Lesnar tossed the tablet aside and charged, hitting another F5 with bone-rattling force. This time, he hooked the leg. The referee counted 1, 2, 3. The bell rang and Lesnar rose slowly, towering over Hogan. He didn't pose. He didn't gloat. He just looked down at him like a man inspecting the aftermath of a storm he'd unleashed. Heyman entered the ring, raising Lesnar's arm high, the black case still open on the mat like a coffin lid. As Lesnar left, Hogan pushed himself up to one knee. The crowd reaction was conflicted, half sympathetic applause, half jeers. The commentators spoke in hushed tones, unsure if this was the last time the wrestling world would see Hogan inside a WWE ring. Backstage, the atmosphere was tense. Hogan refused medical attention, waving off trainers as he walked slowly, stiffly, toward the exit. Cameras followed him to the parking lot, where he climbed into a black SUV without speaking a word. Lesnar, in another corner of the building, sat with Heyman, the case at his side, smiling faintly as if the night had gone exactly to plan. The fallout was immediate. Wrestling news outlets declared it the most personal feud in modern WWE history. Fans debated endlessly online, was Hogan truly the villain Lesnar portrayed, or was this the most brilliant manipulation the Beast had ever pulled off? WWE remained silent on the matter, letting the speculation run wild. But one thing was certain, the trial of Hulk Hogan was over. The verdict, however, depended entirely on who you asked. The Royal Rumble fallout was unlike anything WWE had seen in years. Even in an industry built on spectacle and controversy, the trial of Hulk Hogan had crossed into uncharted territory. The night after, Raw opened without pyro, without the usual triumphant intro, just a cold open on the WWE newsroom set. The company's lead announcer, Michael Cole, sat at a desk flanked by Corey Graves and Byron Saxton. Their tone was sober, more in line with a breaking news broadcast than a wrestling program. Cole addressed the camera directly. Last night, at the Royal Rumble, Brock Lesnar not only defeated Hulk Hogan, but presented what he called the final chapter footage that has sparked intense debate across the WWE universe. Tonight, we will address the aftermath of that moment and the future of Hulk Hogan here in WWE. The live crowd in the arena reacted with a low murmur, sensing that the fallout might be just as explosive as the match itself. Backstage, the atmosphere was divided. Some talent treated the Hogan-Lesnar saga like any other storyline hot now, but destined to fade. Others saw it as a genuine shift in the company's cultural landscape. One younger superstar was overheard saying, "If Brock can do this to Hogan, who's untouchable anymore?" That sentiment rippled through the locker room, shaking the unspoken belief that certain legends were beyond reproach. Hogan, however, was nowhere to be found. He hadn't shown up for Raw, and insiders whispered that he hadn't answered calls from WWE executives since leaving the arena the night before. According to one source, he had flown straight back to his Clearwater home, locking himself away with only his closest friends and legal advisors. Another claimed that Hogan had demanded WWE release the full, unedited footage Lesnar had used against him, certain it would clear his name. But WWE was hesitant. The footage, as damaging as it was in Lesnar's hands, might reveal internal backstage politics that the company didn't want aired. For Triple H, it was a no-win scenario: protect Hogan and risk Lesnar painting the company as complicit, or release the footage and potentially confirm at least part of Lesnar's claims. Lesnar, meanwhile, thrived in the chaos. On SmackDown later that week, he entered the ring without Heyman, dressed in street clothes, the black evidence case sitting in the corner like a trophy. Picking up a microphone, he addressed the camera with a grin that oozed control. "Hogan's hiding," Lesnar began. "The so-called immortal one, the man who told you to train, say your prayers, and eat your vitamins, can't even show his face. You think I'm done? You think last night was the end?" He tapped the case with his boot. "I still have more. A lot more. But I'll make you a deal, Hogan. You want this to stop? You come find me. You face me one more time, WrestleMania. No rules, no lawyers, no PR teams. Just you, me, and the truth." The challenge sent the crowd into a frenzy. Graves summed it up perfectly. Brock Lesnar just put a loaded gun on the table, and he's daring Hulk Hogan to grab it. Over the next 2 weeks, WWE programming became a psychological chess match. Lesnar continued to release short, cryptic clips, never long enough to confirm full context, but always damaging enough to reignite debate. A 12-second clip of Hogan walking out of a charity meet and greet. A still photo of Hogan mid-argument in an office. Each release was accompanied by the phrase, #FaceTheTruth. In response, Hogan finally reappeared via a pre-recorded interview. Seated in his home, wearing casual clothes, he spoke directly to the camera. "I've been in this business my whole life, brother. I've seen people try to tear me down before. But Brock Lesnar? You've taken this to a place it doesn't belong. You think you've got the truth? Bring it to WrestleMania. But you better believe I'll bring mine too." It was the first time Hogan hinted that he had evidence of his own, implying that this war might not be as one-sided as Lesnar made it seem. The seeds of doubt began to spread, and suddenly, the conversation shifted. What could Hogan possibly have on Lesnar? The build-up to WrestleMania took on an almost cinematic quality. WWE produced video packages styled like courtroom dramas, complete with slow-motion footage, ominous narration, and captions like "The verdict awaits." The match was officially billed as Legacy vs. Legacy, Hogan vs. Lesnar, Truth or Consequences. In the weeks leading to the event, both men kept dropping teasers. Lesnar's clips became more aggressive, showing Hogan in increasingly unflattering situations. Hogan's team countered by releasing vague soundbites about Lesnar's past, whispers of locker room fights, business disputes, and confrontations with WWE management. Neither man revealed their full hand, but the threat of mutual destruction hung in the air. By the time WrestleMania night arrived, the stadium was electric. Fans weren't sure if they were about to see a wrestling match, a public unmasking, or both. Hogan entered to a mixed reaction, half cheers, half boos, while Lesnar came out to a wave of raw, almost primal energy. The opening moments of the match were brutal, both men brawling before the bell even rang. Chairs, tables, and even camera equipment were used as weapons. Lesnar dominated early, his raw strength overwhelming Hogan, but the veteran fought back with sheer grit, landing a chair shot that split Lesnar's eyebrow open. Midway through, Lesnar grabbed the black case again, dragging it into the ring. He opened it, ready to unleash whatever final evidence he had saved for this night. But before he could play it, Hogan lunged forward, ripping the device from his hands. Hogan then rolled out of the ring and reached under the apron, pulling out his own evidence case. The crowd erupted. Hogan climbed back into the ring, case in hand, glaring at Lesnar. "You're not the only one with receipts, brother," he shouted. The Titantron lit up, and suddenly, grainy security footage from years earlier played, showing Lesnar in a heated backstage altercation, shoving a WWE producer into a wall. The crowd gasped, the commentary team stunned into silence. Lesnar's expression didn't change, but his body language shifted, a flicker of tension breaking through his usual stoicism. Hogan seized the moment, rallying with a flurry of punches, a big boot, and finally, the leg drop. He went for the pin 1-2. Lesnar kicked out at the last fraction of a second. The match descended into chaos, both men fueled by personal vendettas. But in the end, Lesnar's youth and power proved too much. He hit an F5 onto a steel chair and secured the 3 count. As the bell rang, he didn't celebrate, he simply picked up both evidence cases, one in each hand, and walked out, leaving Hogan lying in the ring. The image was chilling. Brock Lesnar, walking up the ramp, carrying not just his truth, but Hogan's. The night after WrestleMania, WWE programming opened not with highlights of the Royal Rumble winners or the newly crowned champions, but with a cold montage of the previous evening's most controversial moments. Brock Lesnar holding 2 evidence cases, one in each massive hand, standing over a battered Hulk Hogan. The footage played without commentary, only the sound of the crowd's divided reaction echoing over the images. The broadcast cut live to a dimly lit backstage set where Triple H sat at a table, his expression a mix of exhaustion and calculation. Last night at WrestleMania, he began, the world didn't just watch a match. They witnessed a collision between 2 legacies, and the fallout is something WWE has to deal with very carefully. His tone was deliberate, the kind reserved for moments where the company needed to project authority, but avoid inflaming tensions further. He confirmed what fans already suspected. The cases Lesnar now possessed contained more than just what had been shown on TV. "We don't yet know the full contents," Triple H said, "but make no mistake, this isn't over." Backstage morale was tense. Superstars were uneasy knowing Lesnar now had a kind of leverage no one had ever wielded before, proof, or at least apparent proof, of private and potentially career-ending moments from WWE's most iconic figures. It wasn't just Hogan's head on the chopping block anymore. Rumors spread that the files included unseen incidents involving other legends, top current stars, and even management. An anonymous wrestler told Fightful Select, "It's like Brock's holding the nuclear codes, and we're all just hoping he doesn't decide to push the button." Hogan, meanwhile, had retreated again, this time deeper than before. Friends close to him said he wasn't just bruised physically, but mentally shaken. For decades, he had been the one in control of the narrative, the living embodiment of WWE's golden age. Now, not only had Lesnar beaten him twice on the biggest stages possible, but the beast incarnate also had possession of his own counter-leverage. One friend described him as a general who's just lost the war, but still has one last grenade in his hand. Lesnar wasn't shy about fanning the flames. The following SmackDown, he appeared without Heyman, no entourage, no theatrics, just him, the 2 black cases, and a steel chair in the center of the ring. He sat down, placed the cases beside him, and addressed the camera with unnerving calm. "Everyone's asking the same question. What's in these cases? The better question is, who's willing to find out?" He smirked. "Because these don't just hold Hulk Hogan's worst moments. They hold truths about people you cheer for every week. People you think are heroes. And I could show them to you, but where's the fun in that?" The crowd buzzed with nervous energy. Lesnar leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You see, I'm not a bad guy. I'm a businessman. And right now, business is good. WWE knows it. The locker room knows it. And Hogan." He chuckled. "He knows it better than anyone." He stood, slung both cases over his shoulders, and left the ring without saying another word. The mind games worked. Over the next 2 weeks, several high-profile wrestlers and legends, people who had nothing to do with the Hogan feud, began publicly distancing themselves from Lesnar, issuing vague denials about whatever's in those cases. Social media exploded with speculation. Was Lesnar bluffing, using the mystique of the unknown to create chaos? Or was he truly sitting on an archive that could decimate reputations? For WWE executives, the problem wasn't just the threat of exposure, it was the control. Lesnar, by holding both sets of files, had positioned himself as an untouchable power broker. He could dictate terms, demand matches, and shape storylines with the implicit threat that non-compliance might lead to a sudden public leak. It was a kind of influence no single wrestler had ever possessed. Hogan, however, wasn't willing to let the story end with Lesnar holding all the cards. 3 weeks after WrestleMania, he made an unannounced return on Raw. The crowd's reaction was electric, part shock, part nostalgia, part pity. Gone were the flashy colors. Hogan wore simple jeans, a black t-shirt, and a steely expression. He walked straight to the ring, microphone in hand, and didn't waste a second. "Brock Lesnar," Hogan growled, "you think you've beaten me? You think because you've got those cases, you're in control? I've been to the top of the mountain, brother. I've been dragged through the mud and climbed back out. You've got files? Fine. But what you don't have is my spirit, my will, and my ability to fight back. You don't scare me. And if you've got the guts, you'll put those cases on the line, SummerSlam. Winner takes all." The challenge lit up the arena. Lesnar appeared on the Titantron within minutes, standing in a shadowed room with both cases beside him. His response was short, almost amused. "You want the truth, Hogan? SummerSlam it is. But remember, when I beat you again, the whole world's going to see everything. Not just your truth. Everyone's." The stakes were now unprecedented. The feud had evolved from personal rivalry into something far more dangerous, a war for control over the entire narrative of WWE history. Fans began calling it the match for the soul of wrestling. As SummerSlam approached, WWE doubled down on the hype. They released promos showing both men's careers side by side. Hogan's Golden Age glory contrasted with Lesnar's era of dominance. But the final shots were always the same: 2 black cases, sitting under a single spotlight, the caption reading, "The truth will be decided." SummerSlam night felt less like a wrestling event and more like a global broadcast of a verdict the world had been waiting for. The air inside the stadium was thick with anticipation. Signs waved high with phrases like "Release the Truth" and "Hogan's Last Stand." Merchandise vendors sold t-shirts depicting the 2 infamous black evidence cases, now as iconic to this feud as any championship belt. WWE had even built a special display at the entrance ramp, a steel platform where both cases sat under heavy lighting, guarded by 2 security officers in full tactical gear. Michael Cole's voice set the tone during the opening hype package. "Tonight is not about titles. It's about legacies. It's about reputations. And for one man, it's about survival." Corey Graves followed up, and for the other, it's about control. Brock Lesnar has weaponized the truth. Hulk Hogan has fought for decades to protect his image. Tonight, everything either gets buried, or everything comes out. When the lights went down for Hogan's entrance, the crowd erupted in a deafening mix of cheers and boos. Gone was the red and yellow showman's strut. Hogan walked with a slow, deliberate pace, his eyes locked on those 2 black cases sitting by the ramp. He didn't pose. He didn't cup his ear to the crowd. He just stepped into the ring, rolled his shoulders, and waited. Then Lesnar's music hit, and the mood shifted instantly. The boos rained down, but there was also an undeniable roar of awe. The Beast incarnate emerged flanked by Paul Heyman, both men wearing smirks like they were already in possession of the outcome. Lesnar glanced at the evidence cases as he passed, casually tapping the lid of one with his knuckle before climbing into the ring. The stipulation was clear: the cases were suspended above the ring in a reinforced steel cradle. The only way to win was to retrieve them, meaning this was, in essence, a ladder match, but with the highest emotional stakes in WWE history. From the opening bell, it was clear both men were willing to destroy their bodies to get to those cases. Hogan surprised everyone by starting aggressively, hitting Lesnar with a series of rapid punches that drove the Beast into the corner. The crowd roared as Hogan followed with a big boot that knocked Lesnar to the mat. He immediately rolled out of the ring and grabbed a ladder, sliding it inside before Lesnar could regroup. But Lesnar wasn't going to let nostalgia steal the night. As Hogan began to set up the ladder, Lesnar charged and shoulder-blocked it into Hogan's ribs, sending the veteran sprawling. What followed was a brutal display of Lesnar's dominance: German suplexes onto the ladder, a steel chair smashed across Hogan's back, and at one point, Lesnar even using the ladder as a battering ram to pin Hogan in the corner. Still, The crowd refused to give up on Hogan. Every time he got to his knees, they rallied with chants of Hogan. Hogan, feeding the adrenaline that made him fight back. A turning point came when Lesnar tried to climb early for the cases. Hogan tipped the ladder, sending Lesnar tumbling out of the ring and crashing through the announce table. The eruption from the audience was deafening. Hogan seized the moment, climbing the ladder slowly, every movement showing the wear of the punishment he'd endured. His fingers brushed the steel cradle holding the cases until Heyman, in a desperate move, yanked the ladder out from under him. Hogan dangled in midair for a moment before dropping hard to the mat. Lesnar, shaking off the wreckage of the announce table, rolled back in with that predator's look in his eyes. He set the ladder back up, climbing with deliberate, confident steps. Hogan stirred, crawling toward the base, grabbing Lesnar's ankle in one last, desperate attempt. Lesnar kicked him away, reached the cradle, and unlatched both cases. The bell rang instantly. The beast incarnate stood at the top of the ladder, cases in hand, soaking in the chaos below. The boos were deafening, but the image was unforgettable. Brock Lesnar, high above the ring, holding not a championship, but the power to shape or destroy careers. As Lesnar descended, Hogan sat against the ropes, his chest heaving, his face a mixture of exhaustion and defeat. Lesnar walked past him, pausing just long enough to lean down and say, "It's over, brother." Then he left, Heyman following closely, both cases still locked tight. But the night wasn't over. In a post-match segment exclusive to the WWE Network, Lesnar was shown backstage opening one of the cases. Inside was not just footage of Hogan, but files labeled with the names of other major WWE superstars, past and present. Lesnar flipped through them, stopping at one in particular, smirking before closing the lid. The implication was clear: Hogan might have lost, but he wasn't the only one in danger. Lesnar now held the most valuable and dangerous leverage in WWE history. Over the following weeks, this reality began to seep into WWE programming. Talent walked on eggshells around Lesnar. Backstage interviews became tense whenever his name was mentioned. Even executives seemed cautious when addressing him on air. The Beast didn't need a title belt to be the most powerful man in WWE. He had the truth, or at least his version of it, and no one could stop him from using it whenever he wanted. For Hogan, the loss at SummerSlam was more than just a defeat. It was an ending. Rumors swirled that he was considering retirement for good, not wanting to linger in an environment where Lesnar could pull the trigger on more footage at any time. But there were also whispers, small, unconfirmed, that Hogan might have found a way to make Lesnar vulnerable. And so, while the trial of Hulk Hogan was officially over, the shadow Lesnar cast over the company was just beginning to darken. The cases were his now. The stories inside them? Untold. And that mystery was more terrifying than anything WWE had ever scripted. The epilogue began to unfold like the next chapter of a political thriller. Lesnar didn't even appear on the first Raw after SummerSlam, but his presence was everywhere. Backstage interviews were peppered with awkward pauses when his name came up. Social media lit up with cryptic posts from current and former WWE stars, posts that hinted they'd received private messages from Lesnar's camp. One former champion tweeted, "Funny how people rewrite history when they're holding the pen." Another Hall of Fame